All right, so we are live, everyone. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Apologies for the 5-minute delay. We had a few technical glitches, but now we are live. So this continues our epic SciComm Storytime series. Every day at 2 p.m. Eastern or 11 a.m. Pacific for over a month now, we have been featuring all-stars in science communication. Everything from flying into hurricanes to viruses in the brains, cool science experiments you can do at home. And today I have a personal friend joining us, which is really exciting for me. So we are joined live in Toronto by Sara Mazrouei, and she is a planetary scientist, an educator, a science communicator, and more. She shares her love of the cosmos and of the moon being bombarded by, meteorites over millions of years with the public in a huge variety of settings, from TEDx talks to Story Collider, Soapbox Science, and more. So I'm going to be sharing her presentation today, but I'll give her a second to just say a big hello, and then we'll dive in with the talk. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sara, and take us away.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. Due to some technical difficulties, Jesse's going to be sharing my slides, so I will just keep saying, next, please, but we'll go through it. So let me know once you've got my screen up and we'll get going. Oh, perfect. Look, that's me. All right, so today I want to tell you a little bit about my journey. I get this question a lot of, how did you become interested in space, or why did you become interested in space? Where did it all start? So I'll give you a little background or story as to where my journey started and a little bit of the research that I've done in the past little while. So if we go to the next slide, that's where that's my earliest memory of being super duper fascinated about something that has to do with the night sky, Comet Hale-Bopp. I remember looking up in the night sky night after night, seeing this really bright thing that was not the moon, that was not just a regular star. It was like a star with a really, really bright tail, just hanging in there night after night. And I remember asking people what it is, and I learned it's a comet. There are a lot of them, but seeing them that bright night after night was fairly unique, fairly special, and it wouldn't happen too often, which is where my whole love for it really started. I got super excited about things that didn't last for a long time, that were unique, that changed our night sky. And another one of the events that I remember on the next slide is seeing my first ever total solar eclipse. And if you live in Toronto or in, I guess, the Northern Hemisphere, more like North America, you would have seen a partial solar eclipse a couple of years ago. I was lucky enough to see a total solar eclipse just right around when I was about 10 or 12 years old, somewhere around there. And I remember the sky got dark. Literally, birds started to fly home, like you see sometimes around sunset. Like all the animals thought it was nighttime. And then, soon after, half an hour to an hour after, when the sun started to come out again, the birds thought it was morning again. Well, they had a really quick night's sleep. And going through that phase and trying to understand how a solar eclipse really happens, what is happening, and the phenomena of our moon somehow aligning right between the Earth and the sun to block that sunlight was really fascinating. And on the next slide, I'll show you how I got to see my first solar eclipse. I did not have a fancy telescope. I had actually access to no telescope at that point. And I saw that solar eclipse in Iran, where I was living at the time. And they were handing out these cards so that people wouldn't just go and stare at the sun, because it's really exciting. It's, you want to see what's happening, but you should never, ever look directly at the sun. That's how Galileo went blind. Like, he was looking through a telescope without any filters at the sun. So they didn't want people to look at the sun without protective eye equipment, without proper solar filters and stuff. So they were handing out these papers, which is basically just like 2 index cards with like a hole punched through them. And you would stand with your back to the sun, and then the reflection of it, or the shadow of it, would change as the solar eclipse was going through its phases. So first you would see a whole circle, and then sort of like a like a crescent, and eventually you wouldn't see any of it. So that's how I got to see my first solar eclipse. It was still pretty fascinating. And then eventually we moved to Canada, and I started, continuing my fascination with space. And I started studying space science at York University. And on the next slide, you'll see that I got to work at the observatory at York for about 7 years. I actually started there when I was just in high school. And at that time, my high school was offering co-op programs where you could do a semester, a part of a semester at a workplace that you would eventually want to work at. And I loved astronomy, so I got to work at the observatory for a semester and then eventually started my undergraduate studies there. Here at this point, I had access to proper eye covers, and I could, this is not a solar eclipse. This was actually, I believe, the Venus transit, which again, we've got the sun and we've got another planet walking across the sun, blocking some of its light, which was pretty neat. I got to see a Venus transit at York Observatory. And from there, I thought, well, okay, this is cool. This is cool. I want to keep studying this stuff. How about I start doing a master's program? And my master's program, the beginning of it was a little bit, just see that slide was actually perfect. The beginning of my master's program it had to do with the OSIRISRex mission. Now, I'm not sure if you're up to date with the OSIRISRex. If not, please go ahead, Google, head on over to their site right after this talk. When I started my OSIRISRex stuff, this was when it was just an idea. So every time that we have a mission being sent to another planet, it has to go through different phases. So a bunch of scientists and engineers get together, they put their brains together, and they write what we call a proposal. They propose what they want this mission to do. And they sort of have to make a case to NASA and say, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to discover, this is what we know so far, and this is what we could learn more. So this was at the very early stages of it where I got involved with it. Actually got to go and see the launch of this spacecraft a few years after. And right now, this spacecraft is orbiting, it's going around asteroid Bennu, and it's taking a lot of pictures of it. And Canada has a big involvement with it too. Shout out to Canadians. It's supposed to bring a sample back. It's actually going to give the asteroid a high five, grab some samples, and bring it back to Earth. But just like any amazing performance, like a dance performance, a musical, it has to do a rehearsal. So right now it's going through its rehearsal phases. That's making sure that it can expand its arm, that it can give a proper high five, that it can pick its favorite site around this asteroid to bring back the best samples. And back when we started wanting to send this mission to this asteroid, all we knew about this asteroid was that it was pretty circular. That's all we knew. We didn't know how much rocks it had or what it looked like, but our views of it has really, really changed. So I've talked a little bit about asteroids, but on the next slide, I'll show you the variety of what asteroids are. Asteroids are space rocks, basically. They're just hanging around. A lot of them hang out between Mars and Jupiter. And as you know, Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system. So it attracts a lot of those little rocks. Its gravity is so massive that it wants to collect everything around it. And asteroids vary in shape as well. If they're really, really, really large, like Vesta, they have enough mass that as they're sort of spinning, they turn themselves into a sphere. Otherwise, they really look like potatoes and, they've got all sorts of different shapes. Now, for my master's study, I studied the tiniest asteroid down there. It was called Asteroid Itokawa. A lot of people, to me, it looked like a potato, but a lot of people think it looks like a sea otter. That's what I got to do. I got to study this space rock, this sea otter, and I had the fascinating job of, on the next slide, counting all the rocks on this asteroid. I sat there for hours and hours and hours looking at this asteroid, mapping every little rock that it had. Now, this mission, this asteroid was the first time that we got any samples back from an asteroid. It was the first sample return mission, but I didn't care about the samples too much. Like I said, this asteroid looks like a sea otter. And we wanted to know why it looks the way that it does. Does it mean that they were two separate asteroids that then came together and joined to form this shape? Or was it just elongated and something sort of gave it a little punch or bumped into it and then gave it its shape? And by studying how many rocks are sort of on the head of this asteroid and on the body and the orientation of them, we were able to figure out that they were probably from a parent body, and due to a collision, it got the shape that it got. And asteroids are super special to us. They're one of the first things that were formed after the solar system formed. They're pristine samples of the origins of the solar system. So the more we find out about asteroids, the more we can learn about our history and about our past. When I was done my master's, I got to do something super duper exciting. I got to work at the European Space Agency for a year. I moved to the Netherlands, therefore all the tulips that you see. And I got to work with scientists and engineers that were working at the European Space Agency. And at that time, I started using data from another spacecraft called Venus Express, which was orbiting Venus. And my job was to sort of calibrate some of its data, try to make more sense of the data that it had. But it was a really, really fun experience. I got to travel around Europe as well for the first time. I got to work with a lot of awesome people. I got to see where you see down at the bottom, the ESA Columbus. That's a mock-up of part of the International Space Station. I got to walk inside of it, and it was really, really fascinating. And then I came back and I thought, okay, it's time to start studying something a little bit closer to us. I like what I call, what scientists call airless bodies. Bodies that don't have any atmosphere or any air. Asteroids are airless bodies. The closest airless body to us is our moon. And these airless bodies are really special. The moon itself is super duper special. It's our closest neighbor. And I always say the moon is like a time capsule for events that have happened in our region of the solar system. So the Earth and the moon are fairly close together. And whatever has happened in their history, it would have been a shared history. Except on Earth, we've got weathering, we've got rain, snow, tectonic activity, erosion that erases a lot of that history. Now, I talked a lot about asteroids before, and now these space rocks of different sizes, they're moving around in the solar system, and sometimes they hit the moon or the Earth or another object, and they create these circular features that we call craters. And my job for my PhD was to study young craters on the moon. So the first time that a crater forms, it's got a lot of rocks around it. And in the next video, in the next slide, we'll see if I can show you the video. My job was to map out the craters on there. And the more rocks that exist around a crater, the younger they are. And one of my great friends with sound systems has created that data of how old craters are into sort of like a musical, but it's okay if we don't hear the music. We can see the frequency of how much the moon has been getting bombarded by stuff in the past. So if you look, we're working backwards. We're working from the past to the present as you see the years coming closer to the present time. And as you may notice, the closer we're getting to the present time, the more impact we've been getting. This is only in the past 1 billion years of the moon's history. And the moon and the Earth are 4.5 billion years old. So this is just the past 1 billion years. And you can see we've been getting hit a lot more in the past 200 to 300 million years, which is pretty fascinating. And for fun, we decided to compare the data to stuff that we have on Earth, some craters on Earth. We don't have as many craters on Earth because a lot of them could be buried within oceans or could have been eroded. But to our surprise, the Earth has experienced the same bombardment history as well. And that tells us that in the past 200 and 300 million years, we've been getting bombarded by more stuff. And you may have heard that dinosaurs went extinct about 50, 60 million years ago. It doesn't mean that one caused another, but it did happen around a great impact cratering event as well, because once we have an impact so big, it could affect a lot of other things as well. It could affect the atmosphere and how living things exist. So the more we learn about our moon, the more we learn about our Earth. And I just wanted to share my favorite crater. I get asked that question a lot. My favorite crater is Tycho crater. It's got a lot of bright rays. If you go out any night and you can see a full moon, the brightest crater you can see on the moon with a lot of rays is Tycho. And that dog is my dog named Tycho as well. Yep, I did name him after the crater. And another cool thing that I got to do while I was doing my PhD, on the next slide, is that I got to go on a lot of, on a field course, because I do planetary geology, and the best way to understand any other world, the moon, Mars, any other planet, is to compare what we see from spacecraft data to what we know here at home on Earth. I got to see the Grand Canyon, I got to see Meteor Crater, I got to sort of go inside a lava cave, sort of like a cave, and see how lava caves on the moon could look like. And that was a lot of fun. So if you're into geology, planetary geology, that's something that you could do as well. Our Earth hosts a lot of these places that help us learn much, much more about other planets. And while I was doing my PhD as well, I got to do an internship with other students from around the world. And our job was to find the best landing sites for a possible future moon mission. So if we were to send the next humans to the moon, or rovers, where would we want them to go? What type of samples would we want to bring back? How would we rove from one place to another? And the amount of data we currently have from different missions to the moon, especially from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, allows us to really see what our path on the moon could look like. We can see how many rocks are going to be on our way, what the slopes are, can our rover go up a hill or down a hill or not, and to plan those routes, pick the best sites, pick the locations that could help us understand, you know, how old is the oldest crater on the moon? Is there water on the moon? What form does the water on the moon exist? And things like that, questions that we have. And that was really exciting because I love mission planning and, you know, thinking about next missions and future missions. And yeah, so that was the story of my PhD. And that's from my graduation. And I share this because I always want to encourage other people to you know, to be bold, to be brave. And you can, if you love space, you can do it as well. You know, take up space, share your love for space, learn more, ask a lot of great questions, and explore. That was my PhD journey. And a little bit of what I've been doing since. I've been working at the Ontario Science Centre part-time, sharing my love of science and space with our visitors. I get to do things that terrify me and scare me every day in the name of science, but I'm learning a lot more. I get to make craters, show people the sun through telescopes with proper filters, talk about planets, make their hair stand up, make paper, you know, talk about how we make paper. That has nothing to do with space, but I'm learning a lot and I love sharing that as well. And another thing that's very close and dear to my heart on the next slide is making sure that we all have a place that we belong and we feel comfortable. And I want to encourage other women, non-binary folks in the space field to come together, you know, to share all their discoveries and what they've been doing, and have a place for us to network, to mentor one another, to learn from one another, and to come up with new collaborations. And just to end on my journey, again, it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter where you are. We all belong in science, and we all deserve to be at the table exploring, learning more about science, technology, engineering, math, arts, music, whatever your heart desires, you belong and you can do it. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for such an awesome presentation. Again, for everyone tuning in on YouTube, I do apologize for the tech issues to begin, but I'm so glad we got such a neat talk in there. Sarah, before we dive in, and Emily Calandrelli's joined us on YouTube. We got a few other people too. For everyone on YouTube, just let me know where you're joining from and I'll share as many questions as we can. But I want to kick off with one that we get every single presentation, Sarah, and that is, what is your favorite part of your job, if you can possibly narrow that down?
Ooh, my favorite part of my job.
No pressure.
Yeah, I think what really got me, what gets me really excited about space in general is that no matter how much you discover and no matter how much you explore, there's always more. There's always something new for you to discover. And I think that's my favorite part, that I get to discover things that no one has discovered before. I get to see some things for the first time, but also the fact that I get to do it with other scientists and sort of putting our brains together to make big discoveries is probably my favorite part of it.
Fantastic. So on that note, to segue off that, is there a big discovery recently that either you've made or colleagues of yours or just in general in the field of astronomy that we should really know right now?
We should really know right now. Oh my gosh, there's so much. There's so much. Oh, there's so much. It's like asking a parent to pick their favorite child. You know, one of the things that was discovered not super recently, a lot of people may have heard about in the past couple of years, was the discovery of Oumuamua, which was the first interstellar object in our solar system. So for the first time, we were able to see something that came from outside of our solar system into it. It was not an asteroid, it was not a comet from within our solar system, but it was from outside. And now that has told us that that is not the only one. You know, it's not a thing that probably happened by surprise. It's just that we were never looking in that direction before. So it's just getting exciting from here on, more exciting from here on.
How cool is that? One of the things that you touched upon in your presentation, and I want to harp on it for a second, is this excess bombardment in the last few 100 million years. Do we have any idea what would have caused that? Like, why are we being, you know, having missiles flung at us?
Yeah, so I should say that these are really large craters, which mean that the objects that have been creating them have also been big, but nothing to worry about. Whenever we see a big rush of impacts, I guess, or rush of bombardments, it's usually an indicator that something interesting has happened in another part of our solar system. Now, a lot of these asteroids that we talked about, some of them live in families. They're actually asteroid families. And sometimes, due to different gravitational forces or heat, sort of gaining and losing heat, those asteroid families break up. And once they're no longer together, they start to move towards the biggest object in our solar system, which is the sun. And remember, most of those asteroids live between Mars and Jupiter. And as they try to go to the sun, they cross over through the Earth and the moon, and they sort of leave their footprints on us.
Very cool. Thanks, Sarah. All right, Emily wants to ask, with your experience with asteroids, she's curious if you own any meteorites yourself.
Oh my gosh, I do. And I'm not wearing it, but my engagement ring has a lunar meteorite on it, actually.
Well, that's awesome.
So, I should have brought it. It's in a different room, but yeah.
So on the ring, but then do you have little collections of them? Can people own meteorites regularly? Like, is this something that the general public can get a hold of or not?
Yeah, you can buy your own meteorites. I would say try to be careful where you buy your meteorites from. I do get a lot of emails from people saying that, oh, I found this thing that looks like a meteorite, or like, I want to sell you my meteorite. I wouldn't trust those sources. There are reputable sources that sell meteorites to museums, for example, or universities, and you can obtain a small amount of it. If you were ever to find a meteorite in your backyard, which has happened before, you do have the responsibility to turn it in to the museums. And some museums, like in Toronto, for example, the Royal Ontario Museum has a day or two during the year where you can take in what you think, is a meteor right or a meteor wrong, and I'll tell you which one it is. So yeah.
Cool. I like to ask this of people that study the moon in particular. If you had a chance to go to the moon,
Yes.
Okay. Have you always wanted to do this? Like, was this a dream of yours when you were a girl, or is this something that you sort of built up over time?
I've always wanted to be an astronaut to begin with. I actually, when I was in high school, I went to my guidance counselor when, they're supposed to help you pick what program to go into. And I went in and I said, okay, sign me up for astronaut school. That's where I want to go. And that's when I learned that there's no such a thing as a school for astronauts. But, I picked the next closest thing to it. Although, this whole self-isolation thing has made me realize that, this is what an astronaut's life could be like. But yeah, I would definitely love to go to the moon and, see those moon rocks up close.
Yeah, fantastic. You highlighted at the end of your talk this, huge inspiration of yours to really make sure that women have a place at the table in science communication. Now, not only do I know that your career has highlighted that in a big way, but also your background and coming from the Middle East is an important facet of how you share science to the public. That this is has there been moments where you've had the opportunity to hear feedback from other women or from people in groups that don't normally get a seat at the table to highlight how important your inspiration has been, and how that would have felt to you?
Yeah, I realized a few years ago that representation really, really matters. It really matters that you can resonate with, other people that you see in positions that you want to be in. And I try to highlight where I come from. I tried to highlight that, I struggled with like learning English when I was in high school and how that transition was really hard for me. And when I've given talks at schools, I've had some students come up to me and say, you know what, I'm going through exactly what you said. And I'm really glad to know that, this is what I can do. And this is where I can be. And just in general, usually when people give public talks we usually highlight all the fun and exciting things that we do because we want to get other people excited. But I think it's equally important to share some of the struggles and failures. And whenever I've done that, I've always had people either email me or come up to me and say, I'm so glad you did that because I felt like I was alone and now I don't anymore. So that has been really great to hear from others.
I bet. This has been something that we've highlighted through the whole SciComm Storytime series, which I think has been really valuable. So whether it's people that, failed a university and then eventually end up becoming scientists, or people that were told they couldn't do things, across the board for our people, regardless of what field they're in, this is a hugely valuable part of this story. So thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate that. All right, if I am at home and I want to learn about the moon or want to learn about OSIRIS-REx, where are some resources I can go and check out online to learn more?
We're so lucky. Today we have access to information, at the tip of our fingers, really. If you have access to the internet, some very nice reputable sites would be different space agencies. So NASA, the Canadian Space Agency, the European Space Agency, Japanese Space Agency, they're all really, really great. OSIRIS-REx has its own page. Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter has its own page. And they have a ton of videos, a ton of pictures. You can also, if you use social media on Instagram, a lot of these missions have their own handles. You can follow them, and there are a lot of scientists that share information about them as well. Your library is also a good place as well to get some books and yeah.
Fantastic. We've had people on from NASA and the Canadian Space Agency in the last month or so you can check out some of their resources. We've highlighted Curiosities. NASA and CSA site can repeatedly get highlighted as being really spectacular. Now, you got this opportunity to go to the European Space Agency, Sarah. Do space agencies typically collaborate in this way? I think that would be a heartening story for people at home to hear.
Yeah, I think that more and more we're moving towards international collaborations. The International Space Agency is a great example of it. The suggested lunar gateway that may be happening in the future would be a huge collaboration again between the US, Canada, some European countries. as well. But typically with every space mission that you hear of, even if it's mainly a NASA mission like the OSIRIS-Rex, for example, other countries could have built one of the instruments that goes on there. And, once they sit around the table to talk about the science, it brings a lot more international collaboration. And that data, anything from any space mission, all the data has to be publicly available after 6 months. So for the first 6 months, the teams have access to that. But after 6 months, that data is available to anyone in the world, and anybody could use them to make discoveries.
How cool is that? And so you mentioned some of these big space agencies, but are there other countries that are starting to create space agencies of their own, and what are they up to in your understanding?
They are. Actually, this year in July or August, it's one of those windows. You may have had guests on the show that have talked about this before. It's one of those windows where we can launch to Mars. So it would be like the shortest time frame to get to Mars. There are a lot of missions planned for July and August. Some of the smaller space agencies, for example, India has its own space agency that's trying to get to Mars again. The United Arab Emirates is actually having their first mission to Mars. Japan, China, they're all sending missions to Mars. But we've also heard of smaller countries. Israel attempted to land a rover on the moon just last year, and they did get to the surface. Unfortunately, it was not a successful landing, but just getting there is huge. And China landed on the far side of the moon for the first time ever. So yeah, so many smaller space agencies getting on board.
Fantastic, Sarah. Well, we're getting to the end of our program, so what I want to make sure people at home can learn is how they find out more about you. So if someone finishes this program, they're really keen on you, where can we send them? Do you have a website, social media? What can we share?
Yeah, I shared it on the first slide that I had, but if you're on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you can find me under SciComm Sara. I also have my own website, that's saramazrouei.com. So you can contact me there or look and see what I've been up to.
Fantastic. And I'll include that in the YouTube chat bar as well. So that's something that people at home can check out. But for now, thank you so much for joining us, Sarah. We really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
All right. Well, have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone at home. Again, we are almost wrapping up our SciComm Storytime series. We've got one more session next Monday, but you can check out our playlist online with all the amazing tales from all our speakers over the last month. Sarah, have a wonderful rest of your day, and thanks again.
Thanks.